evening. I'm Rebecca Highbottom, and this is the Red Lipstick Republic Fake News Broadcast, where we do our best to bring you all the fake news, conspiracy theories, and rumors that we can muster. Basically, we're your geopolitical soap opera reporters. We take utmost care in following reputable sources such as Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and let's not forget YouTube, where we meet. Fact-checking is not necessary, as this broadcast only reports on certified fake news. We are here for your entertainment, not to actually make you smarter. Who would want that, right? Should you be inclined to visit us again, please do subscribe and like. As you probably know, you vote with your clicks, so click on us. And without further ado, let's get to our story. Today, my friends, we look at a recently revived book from the past, a book that's called 1984. 1984 was a book that still enjoyed the spotlight in many Western countries until about 20 years ago. Why did it lose its luster in the first place? It was no longer included in the Western curriculum. As a result, it has been deemed, not banned, deemed as not appropriate for school curriculum. As so many things that are removed from society's curriculum, 1984 was lost for a little while down the memory hole. Other insightful books like Brand New World, Lord of the Flies, and Animal Farm, to name a fragment of the now displaced works of art once in our curriculum. Also, this was deemed in bad taste among the social warriors of today. Now, many of these wisdom-building books are forgotten in the dark corners of libraries and bookstores, leaving our youth stripped of vital information they held within their pages. Tonight, it is not our intention to review or give an overview of Orwell's 1984. That pleasure we will leave up to you should you wish to look into this book. It's a good one, I promise. Instead, we will have a brief comparison of the fictional construct of the world and see if there is any correlation to our current reality we are living through this very day. There is something to be said when a book begins to have life breathed back into it suddenly, and not as a result of the education-backed resurrection. Rather, as a comparison point of reference to explain the world around us in 2020. It's pretty scary. 1984 has had record sales in 2020, reports Amazon. And here lies the problem. Why are people flocking to this book despite the efforts of burying it down the memory hole? We begin by looking at the timeline. 1984 was a book written by George Orwell in 1949, quite a while ago. This book sets out to show what life would look like under an all-encompassing totalitarian regime coupled with technology, very important. Orwell paints a painfully dark reality of what it would look like potentially in the future. Today, we do not need to imagine having technology that can see us, talk to us, record us, and be able to follow us and track our every movements, even if we are not always aware of it. This imagined world of ours is now a very real reality, and currently we enjoy it. This book, however, takes a darker look at society that has allowed technology to be used against its citizens instead of them using the technology. In this book, we only get a glimpse of the fallout and the result of our forefathers' submission to technology before this time period in the book. In this story, it is unclear how exactly this society got to where it was by looking around and seeing how we interact with technology and the technocrats that own this said technology. It's sadly not promising for us as the people. In today's society, we are at a precipice that will more than surely be deciding future generations' fates. The question remains, will the future societies be more free as a result of our technological advances, or will they be enslaved by this same technology? Today, let's look at some of the similarities in this dystopian world and our world, if any. The setting in this book has the feel of depression and hopelessness. The world is dilapidated and gray. People are hungry and, maybe more importantly, divided and suspicious of one another, not wanting to help one another, making it a very solemn and lonely existence, to say the least. Today, when we look around, we do not see depressed infrastructure, dilapidated buildings on the broad scale that this book has. This is, of course, referring to the West only and specifically. I do hope we do not see this in the near future either. But in taking a more honest look at the people's current state, post-Ronavid, we begin to see a crack in our interactions, so to speak. Our society is mentally depressed and anxiety-riddled. Half of our Western citizens are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. Oh my goodness, is that hard? Can we admit we may have a problem? Maybe not yet. Every day brings with it another attack on our social fabric as more and more divisions form. As we hurl insults and slander one another, whether in person or on the internet, with no regard for the greater repercussions of our futures as humans that will evolve from this behavior. We are social beings, and the new dawn of mandatory muzzle wearing has begun to demoralize us on a daily interaction level. We are no longer looking at one another. We are beginning to look down on the ground to avoid contact entirely. These new mandates are completely changing the way we as humans interact. As we watch our leader pundits on the television, encouraging us to snitch on one another, causing yet another tear in our human quilt. What I meant to say is it's causing another tear in our human quilt. The muzzle wearing rapidly was not enough, and so they added yet another demand. We must also not have visitors in our homes. This division looks a little like there is a larger story behind the narrative being sold on the official market to us, no? In looking around and seeing how very difficult and different 2021 human interactions look from just a short time ago, we must ask the question, are we really so different from the people portrayed in this dystopian nightmare? I would argue we are, but only at the inception portion of this sad and scary story. A prequel, as it were, for us, that is. At the risk of tallying up similarities, hunger was a very important control mechanism in 1984, the book. As we have witnessed in as early as 2020, there have been a sheer avalanche of people that are going hungry in the West. The West has not experienced such extreme food lines since at the very least 2008, and we shudder to think it could get any worse. The similarities will be startling should starvation grip our society currently. That, we hope, ladies and gentlemen, will never have the great displeasure of experiencing. Next is the social structure of the society in the book and how it compares to our current society. In this dystopian society, the elite account for 2% of the population. The elite set the rules, and only the elite decide on the fate of the human in their society. The next class of citizens are the ruling class, the class that roll out and ensure the elite's agenda is complete. This class consists of 13% of the society. The ruling class is kept on a short and tight leash to ensure that there is no breaches in the program rollout, and that it keeps the 2% on top and in charge. Very important function. It is not surprising then that this portion of the society has the harshest of punishments when deflecting. Can we say Weinstein or Epstein? What? I'm just drawing comparisons. You can not agree. This social class is also very educated by the 2% in the required elite facts and realities that are authorized only. Even if completely void of reality, fact, or worst of all, logic. The last and the final class is that of the useless eaters, the sheeple, the average Joe, you and me. This class has the sheer privilege to live in utter filth, poverty, and complete ignorance. This class of the society is considered vermin, like rats. They're kept scared, poor, and perpetually hungry. This portion of society tallies at a whopping 85% of the entirety of the society. How is it, if at all, does that reflect our society? For starters, it's a known fact that 50% of Americans, that's true in many Western countries, not just in America, do not have more than $400 in their savings in the event of an emergency. Toss in said emergency, Ronavid, and voila, you have an 8-mile-long line to just feed a family for that day. How long before this turns dire, I ask you? How long, honestly, before the food lines turn into shelter lines? Let's hope none of this, or better yet, never happens. Another interesting similarity of today's society to the dystopian world of Orwell's imagination. The top 5 wealthiest Americans own 50% of the entire wealth in America. 5 people own 50% of the wealth. That is actually a smaller percentage than portrayed in the book, so that's worse. This is actually worse in real life than in Orwell's dystopian fiction. How could that be? Should we not worry about things like this? Probably not. These questions, for me at least, are very fascinating. If you are into reconciling reality and facts from fiction, that's only then. When looking at these fictional times, so elaborately woven, so thoughtful in all the human angles, it's difficult not to make the comparison in our own elaborate and complex systems of things, because let's take, for instance, our monetary system. More than 50% of our society, and we're being generous, have no idea how the system works, but they use this system every day regardless of that fact. Our economy. Who these days understands how our economy works? Well, we are not too different today than that of the society in the dystopian novel, are we? The message is clear: ignorance is bliss, and the people in power are all-knowing. That is the very least. This, at the very least, is the majority of our society's reality. Like in the book, there are those like Winston, the main character, that pauses, looks around, ponders, and tries to make sense of what he sees in the real world around him, and then what the circumstances of the society is telling him, as opposed to what he's made to believe. In our current societies, people who think outside of the box, truly outside of the box, generally are attacked, verbally lashed, and publicly shamed. That's the norm. This sadly is very much reflected in Orwell society's architectural structure. The story focuses on the importance of forbidding and discouraging social encounters and building of social relationships. Intimacy is completely not allowed. People are not only personal with one another in this world, they are actively suspicious and untrusting of one another. Even one's children are trained by the elites, the government, to spy and report their parents. to the authorities should they step out of line. Today, under our old normal, we would be inclined to say that our society had not yet allowed the fabric of our society connections to be so frayed and eroded. Fast forward, March 2020, sprinkle in a Ronavid, and almost overnight, our social connection and structure shifted to an alarmingly negative realm. We look at the floor instead of each other. If and when we do look at one another, it is with fear and or suspicion. We can no longer see each other's lips to share a smile. That has been forbidden by our overlords. People in a short period are becoming more uneasy around others, having less compassion and patience for our fellow humans. This sadly is more starkly a reflection of the foretold novel of Mr. Orwell. If you are not yet aware, there are reports coming in from every state and province that people are now actively snitching on each other as of 2020. This act alone, people, is a gateway to the next level of freedom encroachments. You must understand that once your overlords see that you are keeping each other in check, they can then move on to the next strategic model of control. Are you seeing the frog slowly boiling? Are you? It is clear that the key to keep society obedient, one must control what people say and, more importantly, think. When you bring the society to fierce speech, freedom is easily squashed. Oh, a little on that. Let us look at what is happening to our social media platforms everywhere. If one is not extra vigilant of the words they are using, they are given a warning or worse, deplatformed altogether. It is very important to mention that all speech is free speech. One may not like what someone is saying or what opinions they hold, but that should not mean that they have the right to shut that opinion down altogether. That is a very slippery slope, people. No one in their right mind would agree that threatening or inciting violence can be synonymous with free speech. However, free speech allows for ideas to blossom. Shut free speech down and you take away the evolution of humanity in their progress completely. The final piece we want to take a closer look at is the complete and utter devaluation of language, the shocking blatant hijacking of history portrayed in this novel. In this dystopian future, an important pillar of keeping society off kilter in a perpetual forward-aimed trajectory, the elite know the true value of language, vocabulary, and linguistics as a whole. As such, they debase their society's vocabulary on a daily, taking words away and combining other words to make new words that in turn are less expressive in their nature. All the while knowing that by making language increasingly simplified, the result will be in the citizens' inability to think critically and deeply as when language was rich in variety. What's more, it reduces the ability to express thoughts more specifically and causing yet more division. Fantastic. That's all we need. Along with language, there is a direct assault on history. History is true knowledge and, as such, deemed dangerous. This is simply dealt with in the book by rewriting of history as it presents itself. Meaning, should an inconvenient fact of history that does not align with the approved narrative of the elites pop up, it is simply discarded and a shining new history is put in its place. When the old does not fit the narrative that is required, it is simply changed. Pretty cool, eh? Are there any parallels we, as you and me, can find from our society in the 21st century that at all resemble any of these two dangerous practices? Well, sadly, we don't have to dig deep or look far before we find eerie patterns beginning to form. Take, for example, the past 10 years or so of Instagram, Twitter, and let's not forget texting. That's an important one. These three practices seem benign at first glance, but in taking a closer look, we see this innocent and seeming organic trend have deep and dark virtues that are unfolding and causing our youth to cut, chop, mix and match words that slowly begin to erode. This always happens slowly and over time, making it difficult to realize. This over time will most certainly result in a much more simplistic language with fewer words to express, describe, and capture one's feelings, thoughts, and description of the world around them. To give a very simplified example, consider LOL, meaning laugh out loud, or BTW, meaning by the way. Once language is debased and is more prominent, and that is more prominent in the future citizens will no longer remember what LOL and BTW actually stood for and their actual meaning in full, only the understanding of the general meaning. Laugh out loud means you're laughing. Our rich vocabulary will be stripped to the most skeletal remains, leaving us with a narrow capacity to communicate precisely. History is another one of those pesky pillars of society's foundation. Once it is tinkered with, it creates a vacuum into a memory hole, leaving behind it a society that does not understand where they came from and why, as a consequence, they can no longer orient themselves on where they are going. Changing the past allows elite to hold the future hostage and keep its citizens in the dark. The ruling elite have known this for centuries. Withholding our history places the society at large in the dark and the elites illumined. In Orwell's imagined future, all history is fluid. Only appropriate history is given to the general public, doled out by and pushed by the 13% of the ruling class. The puppet heads of the elites. That's all they are. The ruling class do not have a say in what history is approved and what history is not. Their only function is to ensure it is properly and promptly distributed and widely accepted, kind of like CNN and Fox and all the other pundits. It's no surprise that our own and current societies, we have such widespread anger and intolerance towards one another. We are not only fed the same kind of pablum as the book, they're just slightly different in context. The difference between us and Orwell's dystopian description of the future is that we can still look for, if we're lucky to find, the truth in all the books that have long been not approved on the reading list. We know the burning of books goes back before World War I, and this sinister practice has been repeated over and over throughout humanity's history. An important note: mainstream education furthers the divide between us, the people. This is most obvious when people who study history try to exchange in discourse with those who have not. This is an excellent example of the divide that results in lack of society's coherent understanding of their history as a whole. In short, this creates people with knowledge and people without. In the West, it is increasingly obvious that there is an authorized history, the history taught in schools, and there is an unauthorized history that can be found by digging into the relics but reliable history books. The humans are a fickle breed. We do not keep a written record, we do not keep a written record of our past. We are pliable to be led down any path a ruling class takes us down on. Over the course of the last 50 to 60 years, countless books have been banned and or destroyed, being hailed as evil or dangerous for our fragile minds, when in fact many, perhaps not all, but most were removed and rendered unauthorized, unapproved, just because of the very lesson, or more accurately warning to us, the common man and woman, of what to look for when powerful people want to do nefarious things to the society at large, meaning us. To conclude this ever so dark segment, we want to stress that although this seems to be clear writing on the walls, if darker times ahead, we always say here at the Red Lipstick Republic, and you know what we say, if we look at what's coming at us, we can prepare and plan, and if we don't, we'll be left fighting in the dark, and that, my friends, would be much, much, much worse. I promise. We as responsible beings should hold ourselves both responsible and accountable for ourselves. To take a step in that direction, we must take action in equipping ourselves with information that is based on fact and actual history. We must get curious and ask questions, and perhaps more importantly, we must share this information with people around us. We must also have respect and patience with those who do not have the time or the interest or to better educate themselves with old history. The only way to keep our freedom in the future that is coming at us is by joining together in this fight. If we do not stand together and strong, with knowledge equipped, we will have squandered the freedoms that our brave forefathers died for. If you like to wear a poppy, you should get educated. If we do not recognize our grave situation right now, today, and together, we do not deserve to have any freedoms or rights at all. Sorry, freedom is not free, despite that free seems to be ironically included in the word. We want to make it abundantly clear. Once freedom is lost, gaining that freedom back is much, much more bloody, cruel, and in some cases next to impossible to regain. Look at China. I'm just saying, they're not free. 1984 is a must-read for anyone who wishes to understand the way in which power is gained over a large society of people. This book better helps us to understand the systems put in place and the tactics that have always stood the test of time. Enslaving the people in society always works the same way. Whether you agree with our comparison or not, we do encourage that you always are open to other points of view, opinions, and theories, even if on the surface they may seem outrageous. Keeping the dialogue between us open and not allowing words and opposing opinions divide us, rather taking a step and really appreciating the other side and the other person's point of view. Just starting with allowing one another to have opposing opinions will be a giant step in the right direction. We here at the Red Lipstick Republic always stand by a united society and not a divided one. Together we are stronger, but divided we will ultimately all face the same end: defeat, enslavement, and ultimately unhappiness. I am truly sorry that we seem to be only bringing you grim news. Let us know what you think. Do you think there is any similarities between us and the fictional novel? I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for you tonight. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us. We wish you a splendid remainder of the day, and remember, if you read the news, you're misinformed. If you don't read the news, you're uninformed. Chew on that. And we'll see you next time. Good night.